What's up, Flip Factor family? It's Michael Green with the Flip Factor Podcast, the #1 podcast dedicated to teaching you how to flip less houses, make more money, so that you have the freedom to do whatever the F you want. Today, we're going to talk about learning the numbers behind a successful house flipping business with my friend and co-host, Delante Desouza. But before we get into that, I have a few quick announcements that we're going to go very quick with. First of all, if you guys want to learn more about real estate, we have a free Facebook group called the Real Estate Flip Factor 10X Group. We have tons of cool stuff on there, like-minded people, where we talk about, the high performance way of flipping houses. Also, if you'd like to learn a little more about how to join that group, just go to Facebook and jump on the Real Estate Flip Factor 10X group. If you'd like to work with me to create a super lean business, then feel free to send me an email at mike@theflipfactor.net. Again, that's mike@theflipfactor.net. Let's jump right in. We made those announcements super fast, so we can get right down to business today. Delante, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back once again.
Yes. Because I have no one else, Delante.
Yeah.
You're playing like F. It's just you, man. That's it.
It's like F to F again, and then back to F.
I 100% could do worse, though. So let's be honest. Like, you're a great guest, and I love having you on. And I hope to have you on like a ton. You're a lot of fun, a lot of knowledge. You're out in the field doing cool stuff. You're sharing real stuff. We really have similar beliefs in just giving and unfiltered content. So thank you for being on. I appreciate it. I know you've got some cool stuff today. As usual, Delante is going to ask me some questions. I'm going to ask him some questions. We're just going to have a conversation. We're going to roll it out for you guys. We hope that the listeners and the Flip Factor family are getting some tremendous value for this. We do it for you, obviously, and you want to make sure you're getting something from it. So thank you again for listening. If you guys are enjoying these shows, please jump on iTunes and give me a 5-star review. Again, as I always say, if you don't like the show, then feel free to keep your opinion to yourself, because we don't need any bad reviews. Like, come on, man. Like, give the love, right? Good reviews only, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Dante? Did you give me a 4 or 5-star review?
I gave you a 5-star.
Okay, cool. Because I would definitely unfriend you on Facebook if you gave me a 4-star.
Yeah, it would be like one of those weird things where you kind of just look at each other and like, nobody says anything, but like we kind of both know what went down and like.
Dude, that would be mean, essentially. You know that I didn't used to know that like a 4-star review on like when you're doing Uber was bad, right? Because I'm kind of a critical thinker. So I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. Here's a 4-star review. Meanwhile, they're firing the dude because they think I hate him. I thought 4 stars pretty good. And I realized like when it comes like Upwork and Uber and Lyft and all that, like it's either 5-star or like you're going out of business. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's pretty cutthroat.
Yeah, so please don't give me a 4, anything less, because I really need this podcast. I have nothing else going on in my life. So please, guys, I love you and I want to keep sharing. So let's do it. Delante, you ready to jump into KPIs? And what does that even mean, by the way? Like a KPI. Let's just drop some stuff nobody knows what we're talking about. Ooh. Some people know it, but not everyone. What does KPI stand for?
So KPI, stands for Key Performance Indicators.
Cool.
In a nutshell.
So most of the time when people hear key performance indicators, they're thinking, I'm new to this. I haven't done a deal. I don't need to know nothing about no key performance indicators. Isn't that like high level for guys doing a lot of houses? Today, as always, we want to talk some high level stuff, and I want to give you some great things. But at the same time, I want to make sure you understand why KPI is important to you, even if you haven't flipped a house.
Yeah. And, KPIs are a basic business term that spans across all businesses, but it's basically how efficient your business is running. And like you can jump into this more so with the house flipping in particular, but when we hear KPIs, it's just like you said, everybody thinks of this businessy term that means like, oh, well, key performance indicators. What does that have to do with house flipping? Like, isn't that just what stock investors do or something like that? Like some huge businesses, but you can apply KPIs to any kind of business. And, especially in house flipping, I think, it goes far.
It does. And I love using, so first of all, so everybody knows I don't have an MBA. I'm not a super high level business person. I know a lot about business when it's relevant to house flipping. However, I learned a lot about KPIs when I was reading a book that was pretty awesome. A couple different books talk about it. And what I always love to do is take higher level business concepts and then dumb them down and use them in my business, because I'm not the smartest guy. And maybe the only place I might consider myself a little bit smart is my ability to take really complex things and make them simple. And when I make them simple, then I can actually use them. And that's my belief system. Anything we make too complex, it becomes really hard to hire people to do it, to leverage it out to employees or VAs. And, we end up being the only person who can follow our very cool, complex system. And it ends up not being really good. And I love always using the McDonald's analogy. They make everything simple about making the exact same burger every time. And we want to do the exact same thing with flipping, whether we're a landlord in any part of real estate investing. If you're doing commercial, it's all about building systems, being able to measure those systems and having a feedback feedback loop to know when they're working and when they're not working. And this is what KPIs help you with. So if you're really new, this is still a really awesome podcast for you to listen to, because you want to start off on the right foot and you want to know that, like, what is it I should expect and how I know if what I'm doing is making sense. So I want to give one quick analogy. I'm going to give one quick example of a KPI as it pertains to someone who is new. So let's talk a little bit about, like, if you were looking for a property, Delante, and let's say that you're out looking on, let's use the MLS. We can also, this will be relevant to like driving for dollars, sending letters. There's effectively KPIs for every type of prospecting, and meaning there's a key performance indicator. And what we would be focusing on is the work we're putting in versus the return we're getting back. So if, let's say, we were looking at 100 properties a day on the MLS and we found 5 properties worth seeing, then the KPI would be 5% of the properties we look at are actually worth seeing. So now we can create some expectations on how much work that it takes to get 5 properties that are viable properties that are worth seeing. It means we have to find a really efficient way of looking at 100 and getting to those 5. Now that we know that, and we can start timing out, like, how long does it take to look through 100 properties to get to those 5, that makes sense. Now, this is where it gets really cool. So even if you're, say, new and you're trying to get into the game, you can get a VA for $5-6 an hour that, like, say you're at work and you're making $20 an hour or $30 an hour, and you want a VA to do that weeding for you, like maybe an hour a day it takes. Well, now you can do it a couple times yourself. You can measure how long it takes, and because you know exactly how long it takes, you can shoot what's called a Loom video, which is a free video screen recording, and you can take and send that video to your VA and say, hey, I want you to do this for me every morning. And, take 1 hour. So meaning it costs me $6 a day. When I get home, now I can actually have the 5 properties I want to look at. And I don't have to spend an hour just getting started. I literally can just jump right into looking at properties. So I get home from work, I'm tired, I don't have a lot of time. I don't have 9 hours every day to do this like a full-time real estate investor. So I can start leveraging myself. But it all starts with a KPI of understanding, okay, so one of the KPIs could be that 5% of what I look at is worth looking at and it is worth my time to go see. And then the next KPI could be that it takes 1 hour to look at 100 properties, right? So now we know that it's easy to hire out and have an expectation and be able to set clear boundaries with this VA or any employee that we have, or a friend that we would get to do it and pay. Anyone we would pay for this, we would know it's 1 hour's worth of work. Now, if somebody comes back and says it's 3 hours worth of work, well, the KPI has just told us that they are very slow and we have to address this issue. But if there's no KPIs, right, then we just maybe take it that it's 3 hours worth of work. And we can go on our whole life doing that 3 hours worth of work. So that's why it's so important to measure things, do them ourselves once or twice, and then get a feel for what they actually are, and then hire people knowing that it's 1 hour. And anyone who can't do it in an hour, we give them an opportunity to get to an hour, like a few tries. And if they can't do it, we let them go and we find someone who can jump in and do it in an hour. And this is how you run a highly successful, what we call high performance house flipping business. You got to understand the KPIs. Now, they're throughout the business. Now, what are some of the most important ones? Obviously, are going to be the most important ones that I would say, if you only knew a couple KPIs, because maybe you're a beginner and you don't know 75 of these. The beginner ones are going to be the time it takes to prospect versus like being able to see good qualified homes, because this is really important. This is where people really fall in the weeds when they're new. When they're new, Delante, they just tend to get like just completely overwhelmed with like everything we see on Zillow, the MLS. You could look at thousands of properties and you have no ability to filter down to the couple properties that we'll call the 4 or 5 star prospects. And we get to those 4 or 5 star prospects, that's where we want to spend 90% of our time. Now, I'm able to spout some of this stuff off because I've created metrics, the key performance indicators, right? We know those metrics of what time we should spend and what expectations we set. And now I can tell you that some of the best flippers I've ever met have full-time jobs. Because what I love about someone who has a full-time job, most people come to me and say, Mike, that's a disadvantage, right? I don't have full time for this. But what I really love when somebody has a part-time job, which is how I got into this, I had to do it in a few hours in the evening, often not even a few hours in the evening that I had to squeeze all the important stuff into an hour or two a day, right? Now, the fact that I had to squeeze it didn't leave me room to do the unimportant stuff. I had to really put together systems. I had to be smart about it, because if I was going to be successful at this, there was no way to do so if I made it take more than an hour or two. I literally had to make stuff happen in that little bit of time.
And I think you touched on a lot of important points, like about how KPIs practically dictate how well you're spending your time. Like you said, we see a lot of new investors trying to figure out the numbers and do things like search the MLS, but they're taking 2, 3 hours just looking through hundreds of properties. And these KPIs really are about telling you if what you're doing is effective in your business, as opposed to just kind of shooting all over the place and just trying to figure out how things work. With that being said, I know you said one of the most important KPIs was, how much time you're spending doing something versus the amount of reward that you get out of it. What else do you think is important for a new investor to know in their house flipping business? Maybe they're just getting started. Like, what other things should they be tracking to know whether what they're doing is effective or not?
Well, I'm going to give two answers because I know like a lot of the people listening are new. So obviously we told you new stuff is really going to be tracking your prospecting versus your qualified leads that are being generated from that prospecting. Because all prospecting should lead to one thing, which we call 4 or 5-star prospect. That's a prospect that's going to likely be selling in the next 30 to 60 days and for a price that's fairly close to what we could buy for. And meaning they have motivation, they have the ability to sell. That's a 4 or 5-star prospect. When we get to a 4 or 5-star prospect, we want to ignore everyone else because everyone else we can consider kind of time wasters essentially. Because, if we look at 10 houses, there's going to be really one of them that's a 5-star prospect. The other 9, if we didn't really have time to see one of those 10, we would want to focus on the 5-star. If we have time to see 2 or 3, we might see a couple 4-stars. If we had to see all 10, then likely what would be happening is we would end up seeing a bunch of unqualified prospects. And now we don't want to do that. So that's the number one thing for a newer person is like prospects versus qualified appointments. So you're spending your time seeing properties that have a real chance of being done, like a real chance of like getting under contract, because there's a lot of things that are in play that really can help there. Now, if you're in business and already flipping, then some of the important KPIs for you is going to be understanding how your marketing is working. If I spend $1 on marketing, what is my return on that investment? If you're wholesaling and you're making, say, 3 to 5 times return on your investment, that's fairly solid. If you're renovating, usually our expectation is about 8 to 12 times the money return on our investment. So if we spend $1,000 a month, we'd want to make $12,000 a month, 10 to 12 roughly, from rehabbing. So that's the way we look at it. And if your marketing is doing something less than that for rehabbing, then you're probably not doing great marketing. And if you're a wholesaler, you obviously are not going to make quite as much money as someone who renovates, but obviously you have a lot less work, but you won't make the return. So wholesalers in general, 3 to 5x. So if they put $1 in, $1,000 a month, they're making $3,000 to $5,000 in profit. They're doing pretty well. And that's kind of the reality of that. That's an important metric. And if you're a rehabber, then ROI is pretty big, right? So as a rehabber, I have a couple metrics. I have an underwriting criteria. It's really super important to us. It's the 4 critical underwriting points that we look at on every deal. One's going to be our ARV. We hear that's called a million different things. ARV. We call it our optimal offer number, but that's a sliding scale for us, Delante. We don't really look at that like 70% rule, right? You hear that through a lot of gurus, a lot of coaches. We really believe that can be very different. I have a student in Canada right now because it's very competitive who's paying 78 to 79% and making 40, 50K a deal because of the price points where he's at. So in each market, it's a little different. I'm not telling you to go pay 78%. Because in your market, it might be that it's 70%, it's 72, it's 65. The key is you got to know how to have a sliding scale. So even just in my Baltimore market, I have a sliding scale of like 65 to 76%. So depending on what neighborhood I'm in, I could be as low as 65. But if I'm in a really great neighborhood, I could be as high as 76. I mean, I did a deal last year. I bought at 76 and ended up selling for more than I expected and got multiple offers and ended up being like an 80K deal in Hyattsville and like right on the Maryland line of DC. And so it was really awesome deal, paid 76%. And I'm pretty glad I wasn't using the 70% rule on that because I wouldn't even have been close and I would have missed out on 70K and in money that I could have made. So, and I've had many deals that at 65%, I made 22,000 on them. So I'm glad I didn't pay 70 there because I would have made about 10. So it wouldn't have really been worth it. So it's really a sliding scale. So that's something for, higher level investors, but also for newer investors to consider when you're buying. You can't follow that outdated caveman way of doing 70%. That stuff doesn't work anymore. We're way too competitive of a market. You've got to get your numbers really nailed in and you got to be able to know when to offer more, know when to offer less.
Yeah. So Mike, what you're really talking about is kind of like a safeguard. It sounds like, with this underwriting criteria that you've established, you know exactly how much ROI you should be making on every single deal. So you come in with those pinpoint accurate numbers that you need to get the deal done and to get things moving.
We're usually like 10 to 15% on the ROI. So, for total cash invested, we want to make about 10 to 15%. Again, though, that's a sliding scale like anything else. It depends on the area. It depends on the deal. And I hate using the word "it depends" because I'm a very systematic guy. Now, if I had 2 hours, I could sit here and run you through my underwriting criteria. I would be able to show you that it doesn't depend. It's actually an exact science. But know that like 10 to 15% is the sliding scale. It does not depend. So I'll take that word back because I hate when I use it because I feel like that's not very specific. That's very vague. That's what people who don't know what to tell you say is it depends. It actually doesn't depend. It really is actually very clear. You're going to make 10% on deals that are much higher price points because 10% of a $600,000 deal is going to be $60,000. But if you're doing a deal that's 150, 10% of 150 is 15K. And we always like to have at least a minimum of 25K in profit. So you'll see that that's going to be closer to 15% versus 10%. Maybe even a little bit higher. We'll see that sometimes go as high as 20% because one of the numbers is our optimal offer number. And we told you a sliding scale on that. But then the second number is our net profit. I personally don't like to take anything less than 25K on a renovation just because I think that's like the perfect number as the low point. And obviously I'll take anything above that. I'm not going to turn down a 50 or 60K, but I mean, as my absolute low point, I don't want to take anything less than 25. But now there's a third number that protects me because I'll give you a story of Dave, who used to work with me, my acquisitions guy, super numbers guy, went to college, got a finance degree. And Dave says to me, like, what's the minimum we'll make? And I put him in, I said, 25K. And Dave's like, I got 2 deals for us. I'm like, no way, man. You've been doing this like 3 hours. There's no way you got 2 deals. Well, lo and behold, Dave had 2 deals that made 25K. The catch to the whole thing was that there were 150K in renovation. One was like 115K in renovation. He's like, you said 25K, like you make 25K. Well, Dave was the one that inspired me to realize, okay, I need some kind of system because I can't just say 25K randomly, right? There has to be a balance between how much work I'm doing and how much profit I'm making. So 125K in work is not worth 25K in profit because in 125K renovation, you could blink an eye and go 25K over budget. There's so much more risk. There's so many more variables and things that could happen. So we definitely want to have a higher profit margin. So what we created from that is that for every dollar I spend on renovation, I want to make a 50 cents return. So I'm going to give you one scenario. It's really easy. If I was to do a 100K renovation, I'd want to make 50K in profit as a minimum. If I was to do a 50K renovation, I'd want to make 25K as a minimum. Now we take 25K is our minimum. So if it's a 30K renovation, still 25K. We never take it below 25 because that's our kind of minimum mark regardless of what the work is. However, that will start to slide up. So you can see that this is never when people tell you like you got to make at least 30K or you got to get 15% or you got to do this. When you really understand how to put a deal together and you really know the numbers of real estate, you have the ability to start really engineering a deal and really analyzing it at a high level and putting it together. This is why I win so many deals and why my students win so many deals and why so many of us are so successful because we're using a very, very well thought out system that allows us to be more competitive and win more often.
What are your thoughts on this? So, you know how a lot of people talk about in order to make more money, just do more deals, right? It's kind of like scaling up your business without taking into consideration any of your key performance indicators. Like, is your business even running efficiently at the level you're at right now? What are your thoughts on scaling up a flipping business to get more income, regardless of what your KPIs say?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I mean, that's such a good question. And yes, I think that fits both beginner and people that are advanced. If you're advanced, you're probably thinking about scaling. I know for me, whenever I would look at my income and realize like, yeah, I'd like to make some more money or I didn't have a great year, my first thought was like, well, let me do more renovations. And when I got this new coach about 3.5 years ago, and I made this huge shift in my thinking where I went from what I call the old way of flipping, AKA caveman flipping, completely outdated, what I learned from like all the big gurus, that stuff worked, but it just didn't work well. And it really doesn't work well in this new market. And that's why everyone's struggling so much and really just not getting the success they want. So when I would start to realize like this old way of flipping wasn't working. So my first thought was, let me scale my business up and do more deals. And I went and did that. I actually got to where we're doing 150 deals a year, about 100 renovations, about 50 wholesale deals. And in that year, I had probably one of the worst income years that I've ever had. Now, anyone from the outside looking at my business was like, Mike, you're running a gangster business, dude. Wow, you're doing 150 deals a year. And I realized that doing a lot of deals is kind of very fancy and cool. And it's like having a fancy car, but being financially broke, right? Is the analogy I would use. It really looks fancy. It looks super cool, like you're successful, but often people running those businesses are doing it at the cost of margins. So about 3.5 years ago, I made a major shift and went on a journey to figure out how to start running a really lean business. So you'll hear me talk about this quite often from this point on, because this is something that my students, me and Delante, we always really focus on. It's all about doing less flips and making more money. So the following year after I did 150 and had my worst year, me and my partner, because we didn't have a great year, I mean, when I say we didn't have a great year, we made some money, but doing 150 deals, there's an expectation that we made a lot, like millions of dollars, and we didn't. We made a couple $100,000 each, which I don't think is even close to what you should make when you do that volume, for that amount of risk, the people we had, the money we were spending every month. My partner felt the same way. He totally was like, hey, this is too risky for me. I don't want to keep doing it this way. So we made a choice for me to sell my half of the business to him, and for him to, go, I want to do it on his own. And he wanted to scale back, get rid of some employees, and run a more lean business. And I got the opportunity to go on my own and create whatever type of business I wanted. And so I had a clean slate. I realized, like, even just a week later, I realized he was making a great choice, and I had a really awesome opportunity to build any type of business I want. So I went on this journey, and this is about 3.5 years ago. I went on this journey to have like the most epic year, to take and create the best house flipping business that I could ever imagine. And so the first thing I realized when I got this really cool coach from eMyth, like one of probably the oldest eMyth coaches in existence. He only coaches a couple people. I mean, he works with like a handful of clients, very selective. And his first question to me was, Mike, why are you so focused on volume? He's like, let me ask you, what if you could do less renovations and make more? And, obviously I'm like, well, all I ever knew was do more and make less, but, or do more. It felt like you had to do more to make more. And so he finally convinced me, because he's like, well, what if you could just make 40K a house, do like 5 houses a year and make 200K, or 10 houses a year and make 400K? Could that be a reality? And of course I didn't, I just done 150 houses and made like, less than 400K. So it didn't feel like doing 10 houses would be possible to make 400K. So that coming year, we tested it, and I put all my energy into paying attention to running an efficient business. I mean, we looked throughout our business, every place where I could find things I was doing wrong, where money was leaking out. I mean, we bootstrapped it for a whole year just to test this theory. And I ended up doing 11 flips that year, first year of my own, about 3.5 years ago, and netted about 360K in income, which was almost exactly what I made when I did 150 houses in a year. So, but so let me tell you the difference between the 11 house a year model versus the 150 house model. The 150 house model, I mean, I worked 80, 90 hours a week. I did nothing, but I couldn't even vacation, honestly, because I'd vacation, I was just completely felt like things would be falling apart if I was gone. My partner didn't have quality of life either. That was one of his complaints when we were running the big business. And we always had a lot of cash out, a lot of overhead, probably 60K a month in like employees, marketing, and bills. And so if we had a couple flips didn't go well, we could have months where we lost 100K. It was a complete roller coaster and really very stressful. And I know a lot of people running businesses like that right now. The next year, I do 11. Well, because I've got good systems and I've done some cool stuff, I was able to do that 11 in about 15 hours a week work. And I could do those 15 hours from anywhere in the world. So I ended up traveling 21 times that year that I made the 360K and literally did 11 houses. I was in Costa Rica. I even had one trip where I was in Vegas for 3 weeks. Now, I stayed there because my coach said, if we want to learn how to run your business, you got to let people become leaders in your business. So they're not going to do that when you're there, Mike, because they're going to rely on you to actually start doing everything for them. And I realized I'd been jumping in and not allowing people to kind of find their own groove, essentially. So I traveled, did cool stuff. So I had to break some eggs to make an omelet, but what an amazing first year with that much income and that few houses. So my new belief system is do less houses, make more money. But now you got to do those houses really well. Now, and you can't think like if I do 10 and I make 100K, well, instead of saying that I need to do 20 to make 200K, let's take the same 10 and figure out how to just make 200K off those 10, 300K off those 10. Because see, what's happening when you're doing that is you're increasing your margins. You're actually increasing your income, but you're not increasing your expenses or the people you have to manage or the risk that you're taking. So this is my belief. This is what I call high performance house flipping, which I believe is the new way of flipping houses. It's what I've been doing for the last 3.5 years. And I've accomplished things that I just never thought were possible. I mean, if you'd asked me 4 years ago, before I started doing this, I would have intimately fought you and said this wasn't possible.
Wow, it was like a huge value bomb. Gold nuggets, like a gold boulder.
Gold boulder, I like that. Or how about a profit bomb? A nuclear profit bomb.
Nuclear profit bomb.
Yeah, we just dropped like, what is the one where they dropped on Pearl Harbor? Like, I don't know.
Oh, the atom bomb, is that?
An atom bomb. Exactly.
Yeah.
A
Atomic
profit
gold.
atom bomb.
There you go.
All right, cool. We're inventing names now.
I think you talked about a lot of great stuff. I mean, that makes exact sense why scaling isn't always the answer for when you want to make more profit in your business. And I know just from a perspective of a new investor, they just want to make some money. You know what I mean? Like they just want to do a deal and see a check. But when we're talking about putting things into perspective, I mean, it makes a lot more sense to establish, some key performance indicators to follow.
Hmm.
You meet those performance indicators, you make sure everything is running healthy. And then once you're making, huge margins on your profit, then you can decide whether it's right for you to scale up. Because maybe you like, the amount of work that you're doing now. Maybe you want to do 10 houses a year and make 300K in income. Or maybe you want to, be an empire builder like yourself and see how far this limit goes. But the fact that you even have a choice in the matter is what's awesome about running a high performance house flipping business and putting these KPIs in there.
And honestly, even when I hear you say like, oh, you could even just do 10 houses a year, you say it like it's a bad thing. Cause like, and not saying anything bad about you, this is what we've been trained to believe, right? We've been trained to idolize people who do a lot of volume versus people who focus on profits. And if you really think about it, when someone says, I want to scale my business, is it you really just want to make more money, right? And if you want to make more money and there was an easier, more efficient way of doing so, why wouldn't you do it? But I'll tell you, even me and many people are very resistant to the idea. We all believe that the path to making more money is by doing it through like scaling up your volume versus being more effective, more efficient, and having great processes. So that's the secret today. And that's the big thing that we, even now, like I did 71 houses last year, and you guys on the podcast, some of my students have heard this, but I'm literally getting ready to scale my business back by half this year with zero intention of making one less penny and potentially even making more. What I realized is I scaled too quick and I got refocused on volume again. I joined a big mastermind and everyone in the mastermind was doing like 100 houses, 300 houses. And it got me focused on volume again. I got off track. So I'm getting ready to right that ship, and I'm getting ready to take this whole next year and get back into profits, get back into the right thing to focus on. So you'll never hear me talk more passionately about it than this year, because like I easily can even fall for this. Even as the guy who has a complete strong system that I follow, like we are human, we make mistakes, right? And it's very alluring to want to do more volume and be able to tell your friends. It makes you feel successful when you do a lot of volume. But I've met investors, and I'll give you an example. I met this investor who like worked 2 hours a week, and he was a local dude, and he literally just what he would do. And it was very interesting, by the way. So I love sharing this with the group. I don't think I've even told you about this, Delante, but he was a guy who would take and get building sites, usually waterfronts, because that was his specialty. And he would take and get all the permits ready to build a house and get all the drawings done. He'd get everything like rendered and ready. And literally, once he did that, he would bring a lot of value to the property because he could sell it to a homeowner who wanted to build it themselves, like just hire a GC. And then it was all ready. The county like would have all the permits approved, everything. He would hand you the package with the drawings, everything. And he would average about 100K a deal, and he would do 3 deals a year. That was his whole model. 3 houses a year. But he really was doing some higher level stuff that wasn't quick. So it wasn't like he would get all these permits done in like a week. It would take him 6 months, 9 months. So he'd have a couple going all the time. He's averaging 300K a year, but he'd work no more than like 5 hours a week to do this. So he's a great example of someone who found their niche, was really nailing it, and just decided like, hey man, I want to have quality of life, be my wife, my kids, and I want to make 100K a deal. And he found a way to make that possible. So you can do something very similar with flipping. I mean, you literally could just take 5 amazing flips that make 40K each, right? Only take the best and then make 200K a year. You don't need a bunch of employees to do that. You can do that 5, 10 hours, 15 hours a week, depending on how efficient you are. And, you could decide like, how do I want to live my life? Do I want to live it grinding like Gary Vee until 2 a.m, try to build something that, like the next Facebook of house flipping? I don't know if it's possible. I think house flipping is better. Like if you want to make like $500,000 a year, you want to make $1 million a year, it's all very obtainable. When you start thinking house flipping and you start thinking like, I want to make 35 million a year, I don't know anyone doing that right now. So I'm not saying it isn't possible because I'm not a naysayer, but I will say what I have seen that's more common is people making anywhere from 100 to like $1.5 million. That is very obtainable if you have good systems.
Do you have any closing thoughts or remarks for any new investors or seasoned investors who are considering whether they need to bring in KPIs into their business or not to start running more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it sounds like a high level concept. It sounds like we might be talking over your head a little bit. Like if you're new to business, you're working a job and you haven't heard any of these things. Yeah, study up, man. If you're going to be good at this, you got to get some chops, man. You got to get like a little bit of skill. The one thing you'll never hear me say is that I think this business is for way too long. People have been telling people that this business is a get rich quick. You don't need a lot of skills. You don't need a lot of this. You can 100% be like me, a high school dropout, got in trouble as a kid, bad credit, not great with money, but I had to get smart about this business to start making money. It wasn't until I made that commitment that I started actually making money. So you don't have to be a genius to start, but you certainly better start gaining some skills, some valuable skills you're going to need as a house flipper. And KPIs will tell you exactly what you're doing well versus what you're not doing well. And you need that feedback loop, because I will tell you many times in my life, I thought I was doing well. Me and Delante looked at some KPIs yesterday and we were shocked by the thing we thought we were doing well that we weren't. Right. In the coaching business, we realized like we're doing one thing and it was like completely a black hole of money that we just sunk in. We gave back in a big way and we always are happy about that. But we like lost like 70K last year doing this one thing. And I tell people I don't get rich coaching. I love helping people and giving back. But at the same time, I don't really want to continue any bad habits in my coaching business, obviously, or in my flipping business. I want to make sure that if I find a bad habit, now the secret to why I found that out was the feedback loop, right? It was the KPIs. When we looked at the KPIs, we figured out, okay, wow, we thought that thing was awesome, but it wasn't. So in your flipping business, you're going to need to know that. You're going to need to know what's working and what's not, and you want to know it sooner than later. And that's when KPIs jump in and knowing the numbers. Delante, I know you had a cool story, so share. So Delante is like, he's always got our goofy story that we're going to come in with. Kind of considered firing him from this because I told him to get some house flipping stuff. And I remember a couple episodes we ended up talking about a dolphin that was a Russian spy. I would say that I'm more entertaining conversationalist since Delante has given me these goofy stories, because it's pretty fun to talk about a dolphin that's a Russian spy. And I wouldn't even know anything like that because I don't follow the news or anything. But all right, so he's got something good today, but we're going to start trying to lean towards real estate if we can help it. But, I'm not promising there won't be a Russian spy dolphin out there.
Yeah, at least these stories will be entertaining for you guys. This one actually comes from Europe. So basically, what they found out is that scientists are on the verge of finding the real-life Atlantis beneath the North Sea. Any Aquaman fans or Little Mermaid, this might pique your interest.
Yes.
So
real life.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what happened is British researchers went out to the North Sea. They've basically been collecting sediment, which is, little deposits like dirt and sand and stuff. And what they've noticed is that this settlement has been linked to evidence of a long lost human civilization under the North Sea. Basically what they say is 10,000 years ago, they believe that there were humans that lived in the North Sea where the seafloor is. But due to, time and like climate and all that
Climate change. Is this a
climate
climate change plug? Real. It's real. Okay. So was this place dry when they lived there?
Yeah, it was dry. And what they said
Oh,
is
that
over
makes
the
sense.
past 10,000 years, the sea level has risen to the point where the civilization got basically washed out. So
Okay.
now, they're finding, when they do like, deep sea dives and stuff, they're finding evidence of human life in the North Sea.
That's really interesting.
Super interesting. Makes you wonder if, there's anybody you can contact to buy some land under there.
Start prospecting.
Yeah, man. Prospecting some underwater land.
Aquaman, the acquisitions guy,
Yeah.
like floating around looking, swimming for properties.
There you go. Put on your scuba gear and get to work, man.
Yeah, scuba diving for properties. All right, man. So hold on. This story felt like it was a lot better when you were going to head down the path that it was going to be like people who lived under the water were living there. So it was dry. And I guess that's just some major change then, obviously. You said it was 10,000 years ago?
Yep, 10,000 years ago.
All right. I don't know how this is relevant to real estate, and I have no way.
Yeah, probably not relevant, but
But awesome, as usual.
Yeah.
I'll let you slide on that one. So, all right, man, you've got some good stuff. But real estate, can we challenge you to get a real estate topic for this story next time? If not, is just keep them coming hot like you did. I don't know if this is as good as the dolphin that was a Russian spy, because now I don't trust dolphins after that story. Totally like hiding my credit card when I'm near a dolphin. I was at like SeaWorld and the dolphin was looking at me funny. And I'm like, that dude's totally working for the Russians.
Yeah, man.
And potentially Donald Trump too. So we don't, it might be a big loop of the dolphins, this undersea world in Russian Donald Trump lovers.
Whoa.
Okay.
Mind blown.
Yes, mine is blown. We don't just drop profit bombs, we drop knowledge bombs.
Ooh.
Like, you got to be woke about the dolphins. All right, man. I'm moving on from this. Delante, man, this is awesome. Thank you so much for being on. Obviously, some great questions. Really got into a good conversation there. This is my passion, what we're talking about right now. This whole doing less, making more, high performance house flipping. You'll hear me talk a lot about this in the future episodes. It's really what's been changing my business and really bringing me back to track and making the money I want to make. So fantastic having you on, Delante. Thank you so much. Again, this is Michael Green. I appreciate you guys, Flip Factor family, for listening. My work is done and your work has just begun. See you guys. Have a good day.